I think that's a really interesting point to kind of look at and focus in on, because it does change the way that you approach the game, you know?
Absolutely.
I'd like to think the Western players are kind of live in that area of staying flexible because there's so many different events of different formats that they've had to play through. So we'll see. I don't really know if there's this particular advantage I'd assign to one or the other, but
I feel like they play out very differently. So 3-deck 1-ban, if we want to focus in on it, it doesn't really favor you to play like double aggro plus D-shift because they can just ban out your D-shift and play against your 2 aggro decks, something like that. Or if you're playing like aggro control combo, they can just ban the one that they're not good against. In a best of 5 3-deck no ban, you can literally just play decks that counter other decks one after another to get your wins in, right? We even saw it last night where one D-shift made it through and his opponent had 3 aggro decks. Even though he was 2 games up, he had to win with D-shift against 3 aggro decks, which he couldn't do. So it makes it a lot more potent to bring counter decks and play whatever your style is in those best of 5 matches versus these where you have to actually build a consistent lineup and know what's getting banned.
I agree with, for the most part, with all of that. It's just like being able to choose what to play against is such a massive upper hand that you can acquire, and it leads to so much of a different decision scheme in what kind of decks you build. Also, while you were talking, I was just noticing Fantasy holding his hands over his head and just shaking them in some kind of intense prayer. I was like, what? This doesn't seem like that bad of a matchup, my man. I was like, what are you freaking out about here?
That's right. You know what? It's a high pressure day. A lot of you and those of you watching, like, you have to realize that this is the biggest tournament that these guys have played in, right? For most of them. Of course, Jay-Z's been on the stage before, and a couple of other players have been on the stage before. But even so, this is their biggest day, right? Outside of next week, if they make it on. So they're nervous. You know, they want to win. This is money for them. You know what I mean? They've spent time. We're talking about 2 months now. Over 2 months they've put into the season. They really want to make it count.
Right. You know, something I started to really notice and appreciate about Fantasy, just by the nature of being able to watch these players, is there's a lot of players who kind of show you different aspects of the way they actually physically react to what happens in card games. We've seen Cezone just talking to himself the entire time and jumping up and laughing whenever something goes right for him. We have other players like Underwear, who is just a statue. He is sitting there unexpressively. Nothing can surprise him. Fantasy, I think I've learned from observing him a little bit, he might actually have a little bit of difficulty with that sense of tension and nervousness you talked about, of very high stake. He knows he has to keep winning, has to keep going, and he wants to. So, I mean, the last time we saw him play, he was dancing the entire time throughout, like, these massive slogs of control mirrors. So, it's perhaps just a way to kind of get the nerves out and kind of dispel his energy in a way that doesn't kind of mess with his hands as he's just kind of playing with these cards here.
Yep. And I really like the way the individual thing is, because there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever feels most comfortable to you. I remember really early on in my card playing career, I had a better player than me in a game talk to me about emotions and tilt and things like that you can go through when you're in a big match like this, or, you know, whatever game you're playing, you know, Shadowverse or any other game, even life. You know what I mean? You go through something, you can feel emotions. If you do, they can affect your decision making after that because of how weighted they are, you know, to your emotions. And it can cause you to misplay. It can cause you to go down, you know, wrong lines of thinking, that kind of stuff. However, if you're the type of person that plays into your emotions very well, and you can ride the highs and kind of shrug off the lows, it can really be advantageous because you get amped, right? You keep that energy up. The decision fatigue doesn't set in as much, things like that. However, some players like Underwear might favor the robot approach, right? I call it that because really what it means is you don't let your emotions affect you at all. You're just beat boop the entire time. You don't let the highs affect you too much. You don't let the lows affect you too much, if at all. And you use that strategy to kind of like cement your mindset throughout a tournament. So it's very interesting, like you said, to watch the different players and how they react that way.
Yeah, especially these past few days. And I mean, I've already kind of mentioned this, but I feel like yesterday was perhaps just by far one of the most entertaining days of Shadowverse I've ever seen. And it's just because of how much personality we saw and how varied the players' kind of playstyles started to sort of falter when they were faced with situations that they weren't really prepared to handle. That kind of thing. Now this game has had a very, very interesting development so far, especially there. I was not expecting a top deck homecoming into an immediate use of it to answer these Magic Illusionists, but we are seeing right now a kind of game happen where Underwear is, oh, wow. Good lord.
Wow. This is just lights out. Fantasy had a very aggressive start. Oh my goodness. Second homecoming drawn. I think it's just delaying the inevitable, though. I don't think Underwear is anywhere close to winning, and Fantasy has all the tools he needs already. Oh my god.
Play him again.
Yep. He only got 2
kidding.
homecomings. We've already used them both.
Ugh. Well, let's try to kind of develop how that has affected the game. We have already talked a lot about how Magic Illusionist can single-handedly win a game by himself when you have the right opening hand with him. In this case, we see Fantasy open all 3 copies around the top 10 cards of his deck in a perfectly good hand to work with all of them. And, you know, that's really Underwear's undoing. What answer does he have other than just blowing his homecomings to try to get them off of him, try to keep his health total stable with Aaron, but just doesn't work out at all. Just gets completely slaughtered by this train of Magic Illusionists.
Fantasy blessing RNG right now. He's like, make my hands consistent, oh gods of RNG. I need one more. Let's go.
That is the epitome of Bless RNG, actually.
That's right.
It's
literally in there.
I think it's so cool because you know, Fantasy looks so nervous. He looks like he really, really wants everything to go right for him, but you know, he's in a great spot. I think he's brought some really, really strong decks.
And notice Underwear, he lost the game. Expression has not changed.
I'm like trying to. Okay, he's moving at the very least. I was like, is this man breathing?
He is alive. He is playing the game. All right, so now we've got Control Blood against Forest. From what we know about this matchup, Forest tends to have the advantage outside of things of Mask of Black Death because it can just deal the damage from hand, whereas Control Blood favors cards like Diabolic Drain and things that have to target board like Vampirkiss to gain their life and try to control the board, which you can't really do against the Forest game plan. So Fantasy really needs to get the proper cards on the right turns against Forest in order to kind of win this matchup.
Yeah, what scares me a little bit is I think that Fantasy, I think his natural way of playing aggressively would have worked perfectly fine for him in this matchup. But he's brought a deck that I think has started to overcompensate a little bit in the terms of being defensive. I noticed this especially with Care Package last time, actually. Only running 1 copy of Spawn of the Abyss means that tool can sometimes just be the single strongest piece of the deck. You want to be able to finish games as Controlled Blood because there are decks in this game that will instant win against you after a certain number of turns has passed if you don't make any plays like that. And so running this full defensive lineup, not really having that many options to play aggressively, get Underwear down to the life total we'd have to be at to be able to finish him off with Temptress Vampire or anything like that. I think that is just not the way to approach this matchup, and this list might fail him in that regard.
Look at this draw too from Underwear. This is about the best you can hope for. He's already got 2 Roaches in hand. He has an Elven Princess Mage and a Fina, and is on the draw to use both Evos effectively into a 3rd Evo for damage. All he's missing at this point is a bounce spell.
Yeah, and Fairy Circle? I don't think it needs to be stated even how much this adds to a 0 cost hand. That is like, I'm pretty sure 2 0 costs in Fairy Circle is how 5-7-8 happens. Like, that's really beyond all the complexity of people who haven't played this list before, don't know what you need to be looking for to get the damage off. That's it, is a 1-cost generator, a lot of cards to play in the 0 costs with the bounce.
And real quick, I just want to point out, in case you guys were wondering why Underwear played one of those 0-cost fairies, it's to set up for the following turn, because if he plays Fina and evolves it next turn, he'll stay at 8 cards, and he doesn't want to overdraw so that he can draw his bounce spell. So, just important things to note when you're playing Forest, not to overdraw.
Right. I think, not, or at least like holding both of them there is a trap that I've seen a lot of players fall into very often, but, you know, we'll see next turn if what he draws next would have been, like, super important, but not taking risks like that, knowing he doesn't have to. The 2-0 costs, one of them is replaced by the Goblin Mage, just shows you, always think ahead, know what your next turn is, and that is the way you can kind of seal down these matchups that might seem like you already have a very big advantage, but you don't want to put any risk into any kind of misplays messing up for you.
Right. And that's also to say, if you already have the combo in hand, like if one of the cards in hand like that Fairy Circle was a Nature's Guidance, you're okay with actually overdrawing the next card because you literally don't need anything else. You've already got it, and you want to keep all those 0 costs for a consistent 20 damage on a turn where you can actually spike it.
And on that scenario, no bounce in hand if he had 9 cards because he had not played a 0-cost fairy. I mean, he would have had the option to play one afterwards, but that doesn't develop the fairy in a equally timely manner. But he would have milled the first bounce he's seen all game with that.
And honestly, with looking at the hands, I don't think that Fantasy has any chance to win this game. He doesn't have any Mask of Black Deaths. That Fanged Serpent isn't going to be a big enough threat to stop any type of a Roach combo, especially with an Airbound Barrage. So Fantasy's got to draw something quick here to try to stop this combo, because he already knows that Underwear has everything he needs, right? He already knows that Athena's been involved. He already knows an Elven Princess Mage has been involved. He's got to be scared.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Fantasy had a really, really strong game plan with his, burn rune, just because, that list can handle a lot of different things. I think it could handle just fine versus a deck like this, but this is such a situational list. I feel Spirit bringing here, it's very similar to his Dragon list, in that it's like they're both tech to just grind games out, but, this is NA. This is not like the same meta as Japan, where there's a lot more grindy games. You have to be able to anticipate that you need some kind of option, at least, in your control decks to outpressure or deal with combo decks like this.
So he can play 3 spells plus an Evo. So that's not lethal this turn, because he gave away the bounce. But next turn, he's going to be going straight into his endgame with 3 Roaches in hand. And again, no Mask of Black Death.
I think it's really funny that Underwear gives him that cheeky little BM, and then you look at him and he's still just staring forward like a robot. Like, this man has the emotionless BM plan in mind, but alright. How do you even count a homecoming OTK? I'm pretty sure this man has like 34 damage or something. Like,
yeah, he's probably got like 1,025,000 damage right now, I think is just about it.
I mean, I
think
I
Underwear
want
is
to count it
counting
out
the best
out of the out of the fear that he doesn't like maximize it in order to not BM. I want to see how much damage Homecoming actually adds here. So Roach into Fairy. Like, if he could have Fairy circled first and then Roach,
yeah, if he Fairy circled first, yeah, it would have been more damage. He can still do it for a lot of damage, but yeah.
Well, he did it exactly. But I think, okay, he only had one additional play point afterwards. Didn't really have any need to be in there. But even with that, he was like an Evo over with a play point left over. That is crazy.
Well, the big advantage that it does is it bounces more than 1 Roach, right? First of all. Yeah. Secondly, it clears off your board so that you can effectively play more spells to the board on the same turn. So it does double duty for getting that Roach damage in.
Yeah. I feel like everything went right for Underwear that game. He had a very quick, very fast, like Sonic speed sort of approach into just getting his hand right there. Had the evos he needed. On top of, Fantasy, what are his wards really? He has Fanged Serpent, which would have fallen even to just the Airbound Barrage. That was enough. He didn't even need to develop Homecoming itself. It just happened to also be very convenient for him to do it against this Control Blood list, because he was under no pressure whatsoever. Now, I think we might see the same thing happen here. I mean, this is actually kind of similar to what happens in no-ban formats. Is the bans didn't work well for Fantasy here, so he has to play into this uphill battle twice. Even if you get a quick first victory, that might not be enough for you if you just have 2 kind of 30-70 matchups happening twice in a battle, or back-to-back.
This was actually the ban choice that I was interested in, because if you're playing Control Blood and you know your opponent's playing Seraph, I think you almost have to ban Seraph, because I don't know if there's a realistic win opportunity, especially with the way that Fantasy has built his deck, right? He's not playing those aggressive end-the-game cards. Seraph can literally just do whatever it wants, kind of like we just saw Roach did against it, and just play out at Seraph and just win the game without any real threat of dying.
Right, and it's not like Underwear's Dragon list is a dedicated Ariat combo list. It is a Dread Sea Dragon list with Urds. That's not really a 20 damage combo deck, and when you're playing Control Blood, that's the difference between whether you instant lose to a combo or not, because you can so easily keep yourself at full defense against control decks, or ones with imperfect combos. That said, I'm kind of disappointed everyone keeps banning out Underwear's Dragoncraft list. There's 2 Hellblindies in it. Sorry for spoiling that, but... I want to see that. What's the purpose of that?
I want to see Hellblindy. Is it Hellblindy or Hellblindy?
I can't speak Norse, so I wouldn't know, but Hellblindy sounds pretty good. That's what I'm always going for.
Yeah, it's probably something that we can't even pronounce, is what it really is. So what we see, yeah, do that for us. What we see is Fantasy trying to do his best impression of an aggro deck, and by virtue of the way he's playing, just playing on curve with as many followers as he can, one right after another, to try to pressure Underwear. Unfortunately, this curve stops at a certain point and isn't really going to be able to keep applying pressure. especially because most of the followers are smaller than an aggressive follower deck might present on these turns.
Very true. I'm gonna nod my head and pretend I was listening to that and not the pronunciation of Help Lindy.
Yes.
Which there's like this weird site that has like every different language someone submitted how to pronounce it. It's pretty much everyone said Help Lindy. So
okay,
there it is. I agree with
Help
what you
Lindy
said, even though I was like half listening.
It's okay. So Mask of Black Death, I think, is just there because I think Fantasy knows that he's kind of under the gun. He's just really hoping that Seraph doesn't hit play. This is where his prayers are coming in.
I'm gonna call that
as
one
we see it.
Mask of Black Death.
What was that?
I'm gonna call that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm gonna call that a cosmetic Mask of the Black Death. He just put it on because he grinded for it for a very long time. It gives him a little bit of extra charisma, maybe a bit of extra M-res, that magic resistance that is not going to help him versus this Seraph.
Right, and he sees Seraph. You can see the immediate frustration on Fantasy's face. He knows there's nothing he can do. No Odin Tex in this deck to beat Seraph. And this is just going to be a quick 2-game comeback from Underwear here, just understanding these matchups, knowing that Control deck was the deck that he needed to target out, and he drew perfectly in both games against it.
Does he have the full combo here? I mean, it doesn't matter too much. But,
I don't think it matters. Yeah, he got it anyway, but I don't think it mattered.
Good job.
But man, that's just so unfortunate. Fantasy did. I mean, he made the call on what to ban. He thought he could beat this, or perhaps he just overlooked some weakness, perhaps in his control publicity. Thought he might have been able to just kind of get out there in the first place, but no, it didn't work out.
Right, so Underwear gonna be advancing here, and Fantasy going down.
A 2-1 victory over Fantasy, and that is certainly a picture book perfect example of Control losing the combo. Right, both times the combo just pushed through, and that's the kind of pressure that you need to break through Control Blood's defense. Hey, if Underwear